Now, in order to introduce our first guest of the day, I'm going to read an excerpt from her book because it says it all. There are times when I have to pinch myself as I stand in Kensington Palace coordinating an event for the future king. Thanksgiving dinner with Robbie and Ida Williams and their A-list guests, or ironing Howard Donald's shirt as the Take That star practices his best man speech. Insane moments in a roller coaster life. Sounds like it's going to be a fab book. Welcome to the show, Liz Taylor.
Thank you and good afternoon. I sound like Molly Maid, really, don't I, with the ironing and sort of and all that sort of stuff. But it's not. I'm not.
No, not at all. Not when it's someone like Howard Donald. I tell you as well, what a fantastic name. Do you ever get pulled up on that one?
I do. Actually, I'll tell you a very funny story. I was working in Istanbul and I got off the plane and there was a sign there and it said Liz Taylor. And the TV cameras were waiting through the passport control, but she'd been dead for about 5 years. I don't know whether they thought she'd been resurrected. But it's my birth name. And and it's interesting how people still sort of hit on it now. So, yeah, it's good.
Yeah, it is good. It's a lovely name. Right, let's go back to the beginning then. Apparently, your school report read, when you were just 4, Elizabeth would be more productive if she wasn't so bossy. But you say that that's given you the drive you needed.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that was unkind. I think organised would have been a better adjective to use than bossy. But yeah, I've always been a strong character and I was not academic. I hated school. I was very privileged. I went to a private school. I went to Manchester High, which stood me in good stead. But yeah, I was very organised. And it's interesting, because I met somebody on the train very recently who I'd been at school with. I hadn't seen for, God knows, 30 or 40 years. And she came up to me and she was chatting to me and she said, I always knew you'd be successful, she said, because you were always a little bit off the wall. And I thought it's interesting how people perceive you. So, yeah, the bossiness sort of triggered the creativity and the organisational skills at that age, hey?
Yeah, well, you are right. I mean, event planning does take both that creativity and organisation. How did you get into it then? Because I know your father wasn't too keen on the idea.
Well, listen, as I said, I was privileged. He was a leading QC. He became a judge. I mean, you've got the whole picture here, but we were absolutely at loggerheads. He was a bully. I mean, it's all in my book, Tailor Made, which, as you know, has come out recently on audio. And he was the one really that drove me because I had the most horrendous relationship. Whatever I did was not right. And when I was 17, my parents split up and that was my A-level year. So that was it for me. I was just emotionally screwed completely. And I flunked my A-levels, although I did stay on for that year. And I went to join Marks and Spencer's and did the management training scheme, which I loved because it was retail, it was communicating with people, it was all the admin skills, and it was right up my boulevard. And I went into retail for 10, 12 years until I met the father of my children, who was actually my second husband. I mean, could make a movie here. I was married at 21, divorced at 22. We won't go into that one. But I'm remarried at 27, and I'm Jewish, and he was very religious, and he didn't want me to work on a Saturday. And I was pregnant with my second daughter. I have them. There was only 14 months between them, and I left him when they were 2 and 3. But at the time that I was pregnant with Katie, I'd stopped working and I went into the Holiday Inn, which had recently bought the Midland Hotel, with this scheme of, I was selling evening wear on behalf of a client that you could hire it if you came into the city and you didn't have the right thing to wear. You dial this 0800 number. And it was one of his harebrained schemes. And I got on really well with the director of sales, a girl, I'll never forget her because she gave me my first break, Elaine Ferguson.
Oh, I know Elaine. Small world.
Do you know her?
Yes, I was in event management as well. I was director of sales for various hotel companies around the country, and I know most of them. Yeah, Elaine Ferguson. I think we're probably roughly about the same age.
Oh my goodness! Did our paths ever cross?
I don't know, actually. I think I'd recognise your name. I'm not sure.
Well, anyway, so I met Elaine, and she wanted to launch the hotel. She wanted to do a Hollywood night. The PA's in the city in the swimming pool, which was down below. And I said, well, I'll do it. I'm, quite organised and I'm not really doing anything. And that was how it started. Ainsley Harriot's father, Chester, was the most fabulous jazz pianist big guy who used to belt out the tunes. It's a club called Bavardage.
Wow.
And he came in and we put a baby grand piano and we filled the pool with balloons. And honestly, I didn't have a clue what I was doing, but I knew that I had an opportunity. And it was a massive success. And they gave me 2 more jobs to do. And that is how it started. I can't tell you too much because you've got to read the book.
Exactly. We don't want any spoiler alerts. But how long have you been doing it then now?
I'm going to give my age away though, aren't I? 1986.
Wow.
I started. So what's that? Over nearly 40 years?
Yeah.
And you know what? It's changed. How it's changed, because there was no industry then. People were, there were no in-house event management teams. People didn't understand the service that could be provided. So I was lucky because I got in right at the beginning, and I realized very, very early on that the key to the success was the relationships that I could develop with the people that had access to these clients. So Royal Bank of Scotland, who were one of my first clients, they used to hold annual gala dinners and recognition events. And they'd go to a city centre hotel to put them on. And the hotel would then refer me to sort of add the magic and the glamour. And I saw that opportunity. And that was what I invested in. People think it's very easy to event plan, but there's a whole sort of structure behind how you develop the business side.
Yeah. And it can be very stressful. And I don't know how old your daughters were then, but if they were young, trying to be a mum at the same time.
I was a single mum. They were 2 and 3. Again, the whole story's in the book, but suffice to say that when they were 8 and 9, their education fund had been emptied without my knowledge, and they were at private school. So that was when I actually put my foot on the accelerator and got the show on the road. I had a Scottish girl who came to stay with me for a couple of months in the summer, and she stayed with me for 10 years. And her and my mum were my support network. So I would say for at least 5 or 6 years, I don't think I drew a salary. I paid the nanny, I put food on the table, and I sorted the kids out. But I never once doubted. I was never frightened by it. It never frightened me because I loved it and I loved the challenge, and I was confident enough to know that I wasn't going to sink.
Yeah. Excellent. Now, of course, there's more in the book, and all that glitters isn't always gold. There are struggles and challenges, which people will have to buy the book to find out. But we want to know about the glittering gold bit. So tell us about Harry Styles and his cake.
It's funny. Listen, my black book is the reason that I set up the consultancy during COVID. And I'll just very briefly, it's a consultancy that supports the hospitality industry. And when the party business shut down, I wanted to keep the brand alive. And I realized that my black book was my golden egg. So Harry Styles was a prime example. I have a client who I've worked for many years. He's a nationally known brand. He's a fabulous northern guy, and his daughter was going to be 18, and we were organising the party. I said, if you could just have one thing. I said, what would you want? He said, I don't know. He said, I'll tell you what I'd like. I'd like Harry Styles to wheel in the cake. And I think he was sort of being a bit blasé with me. And I thought, right, mate, you've got it. And I had a contact through, I knew his management, who now looks after Jane Corden, Ben Winston, who was also one of my podcast guests. And his is an amazing story if you want to listen to the podcast. And I just messaged Ben and I said, look, this is, mad, but is he around? And he said, yeah, actually, he's in Leeds that night. I said, well, do me a favour. I need him to bring this cake in. He said, no problem. And Harry Styles wheeled the cake in. And then I realised you realise the value of the connections. They're doing it because they respect you. They're doing it because they like you. And one good turn deserves another. And that's how, I've got, I text somebody this morning who I'd done a favour for, and I've got Joe Malone coming onto my next podcast series. And so I know, so it's all that sort of stuff. You give and take.
Yeah, yeah. Get us to send you some candles.
Yeah. Mine and Basil. Yeah.
So let's look at some other celebrity-filled anecdotes then. A mysterious phone call that leads you to Gary Barlow.
Oh, this was hilarious. And again, it's in the book. So let me explain to the listeners. There is the book Tailor Made, and now it's out on audio. And I'm actually reading it. So it's probably a bit funnier. I'm told it's been funnier than if someone else has. So I'm not going to get into too much detail, but everyone should learn from this. It was a sunny day, and I was in the office, and one staff was out for lunch, and one girl was answering the phones. And I thought, oh, should I go to Selfridges and treat myself? Shouldn't I? The phone went, she came in, she said, there's somebody on the phone, she's having a charity event. I said, did you take a name? She said, no. Well, that's the worst thing you can do, not take a name. Anyway, I picked the phone up. For some reason, I never asked her name. And to cut a long story short, she was coming to Manchester. She'd been recommended to me. She was doing a charity event. She was coming the next day. Was I in town if she wanted to meet me? And she wouldn't commit to meeting me because she had 3 companies that had been recommended to her. But the guy that had recommended me to her was huge in the music industry, and I'd never met him. And she couldn't get into the hotel that she wanted to get into, so she wasn't sure where she was staying. I said, well, this is the deal. I said, I will get you into that hotel. She said, well, it's fully booked. I said, I will get you into the hotel if you meet me at 10 o'clock at the Hilton. That's the deal. So she obviously thought, well, there's no chance. I phoned up the hotel, the director of sales, and I said, I need a huge favour. I need a complimentary room tomorrow night. Don't ask me. It's a hunch. Have you got? Yeah, no problem. So this was the hotel that was full to this girl, had given me a complimentary room. I phoned her back. I said, I've got you a comp room. You don't have to pay. You're my guest, but you have to meet me at 10 o'clock. And at the end of the conversation, I said, who are you? And she said, I'm Gary Barlow's PA. And that was it. That was the whole thing. And I slid off the chair, and I thought, but it's your hunch and your gut. And I have a team of 5 and I've probably got sort of more P45s than anybody in history here, because a lot of people can't hack it. But you can never, ever underestimate anyone. And the same guy that recommended me to them, and as a result of that, I got Howard Donald's wedding, also recommended me to Peter Kay's management. And he phoned me and he said, they'll be calling you. And I thought, well, thank God you give me the heads up, because if someone phoned you and said it's Peter Kay here or Peter Kay's manager, you'd go like, oh, yeah,
of course.
Jog on. And I'd never met this guy, and I saw him at a charity do, and I said, I've got to introduce myself. He said, I know who you are. I said, please let me make a charitable donation. He's a very successful music guy. And he said, no, mate. He said, I know you'll do the best job. He said, just look after them. And we've been great friends ever since. And, they are so, and it's not about the celebrity industry doesn't attract me, but it is amazing for my brand. I'm not a celebrity event planner. I am a wedding planner, corporate, private, all weddings, all sorts. I'm not celebrity, but the celebrity endorses the brand, and I'm very brand driven.
And what about King Charles then?
Oh, that was hilarious. It always happens on a Monday morning. I think people must, and you also get the crank calls on the Monday morning, because weirdos look at the internet and sorts of websites, and then you get these stupid calls. So I get an American woman on the phone on a Monday morning, and she said, oh, should I be giving your number? And we're doing an event in London, and in 3 weeks' time, and we've been let down. And I thought, oh, what's this? And she said, and I'm told that you're the person that can make it happen. And so she said, can you be at Kensington Palace tomorrow? So I got my hairdresser on my left hand speed dial as I've got her in my right hand on the phone. And I said, yeah, I can be at Kensington Palace tomorrow. And I'm also, you're a little bit nervous. You think, what's going on here? And I said, who's the client? And she said, it's Prince William. And I'm thinking, this can't be real. This can't be a real call. And I said, oh, okay. And I look after a band from Paris called the Swan Band, who I've looked after for 25 years. And they're phenomenal. They're international, hugely expensive, and they are just off the scale. And I thought, right, I'll get my band in here. So I said, well, what's going on? She said, well, we've got a private dinner for 250 who have pledged to go to it. And then we've got a concert for 400 in a marquee, and we need it pulling together. She said, we're absolutely in the mire with it. And I said, have you got entertainment? Because I look after this band from Paris. And she said, oh, yes, we have. We've got John Bon Jovi and Taylor Swift. Well, that shut me up, didn't it? Was like... And off I went. And all of a sudden, I didn't need to give my passport. I didn't need to go through security because they needed. And And we did it, and he came, and he was just gorgeous, and she was pregnant with George, and so she didn't come. But it was, they're sort of pinch me moments.
Yeah, I'm sure they are. I'm sure there's a lot of them, including Simon Cowell, Sharon Osbourne, Michelle Keegan, and Mark Wright. Lots and lots in the book, and I know you're good friends with Ruth as well, and Eamon Holmes has written a foreword in the book.
Yeah, he's my mate. I didn't have to pay him either. He did it all of his own accord. Eamon, I'll tell you very quickly because I'm not sure how long we have. But Eamon, I was a supporter of the Manchester United Foundation because I'd done lots. Whenever they got through to an FA Cup final or through to the Champions League, they'd have a party irrespective of whether they won or lost. So I've done many parties, and as you know, Eamon is a huge red. And my give back was to help them with the charity. And I was sat next to him at a lunch, and he said to me, "And what you do?" And I said, "Oh, I am an event planner and I do a lot of the parties for Manchester United." He said, "I'm going to be 50 in November." I said, "And you're not leaving this seat until I've got your party." And yeah, we're great friends. I mean, I class Ruth particularly as a very close friend, and it's nice, you build these relationships with people, and there's a trust as well. There's a confidentiality and there's trust, and so I've just actually done Ruth Neyman's son's 21st, which was riotous in Manchester City.
I'll bet it was. He was one of the very first person I interviewed about 12 years ago when I started with TRE. He was one of the first, and he was so nice to me because obviously I was a little nervous to begin with. He was really, really lovely, I remember. And I remember he followed me on Twitter, and I was absolutely beside myself because someone as famous as Eamon Holmes has followed me on Twitter.
Do you know what skill he's got? He can remember everybody's name when he goes in a room. When I planned his wedding, we did 3 or 4 visits at the Elverton, which is where the hotel was that they got married. And the very first time we went, there was a lady there, an elderly lady who was cleaning, and her name was Anne. And he stopped and he chatted to her. And every time we went back, he said, "Good morning, Anne," or "Good afternoon, Anne." Aww. And that is his skill. He's brilliant at it. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's nice. Well, as you say, there's much more in the book. I could talk to you for hours, but we are sadly out of time. I just want to mention that I know you do a lot for charities as well. The book, we are selling your book on our website right now, tre.radio. Yeah, for our listeners, just click on the bookshop banner. It's called Tailor Made, Life of an Entrepreneur, Mother and Celebrity Event Planner by Liz Taylor, who we're chatting to now. And you can buy it right now. Liz, you mentioned podcasts. How do we listen to the podcasts then?
So the podcast is called Events That Made Me. And I think there's about 5 series there. And there's some really, really an eclectic mix of interesting people, stars, celebs, non-stars, entrepreneurs. Jonathan Shalit, who's a music mogul, Gary Neville, who was a hilarious interview. And my next series is coming out in the spring with Joe Malone and Rosie Nixon, the editor of Hello, and all sorts of people. And it's just they're lovely chats. And so, yeah, tune in, Events That Made Me.
And presumably you have a website as well.
I do. I have 2. I have the consultancy website, which is liz-taylor-consulting.co.uk, I think. It might be .com, actually. This is, hang on. And the, .co.uk. So it's liz-taylor-consulting.co.uk. And then the party one is tlc-ltd.co.uk. And follow me on Instagram and Twitter and all that stuff, that social media stuff. I still use a desk diary, I have to tell you. I can't be doing
me too. Can't be doing
with you. Well, there you go. We are the same age then.
You know what? People, I know people can put things in the phones, but I think, well, if you lost your phone or if you weren't on the internet, at least with paper, you've got it all the time, haven't you?
Yes, and I can never remember where I put it. So at least it's under my nose. At least I've got it there.
Well, Liz, it's been a delight chatting to you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.